Hey guys, Youngblood with you, and today I wanted to get back to doing a Picking the Right Ship series, this time talking about picking the right racing ship. Now there's a handful of ships that fit into the category of racer, however there are a few that I think you may not actually consider that could end up being some really good options to fit that role. To really be proficient in racing, there's two primary qualifiers that we must have, and that's going to be raw speed and agility. Things like firepower and durability are less of an issue, and things like cargo ability are completely irrelevant when we're talking about racing. That being said, going back to weaponry and shielding, they do have a place at least to consider. First off is most of you are probably not going to be buying a ship just for racing. So having a ship that can also fill the role of a scout or something like that could mean that you have, having some decent weaponry could be a nice benefit to have. The other consideration is kind of the other type of racing, and that's going to be with death racing, where you can actually go weapons live, in which case having some decent firepower or an ability to survive attacks through good shielding is a very good thing. So getting into the ships, the first ship that I wanted to talk about is probably the most limited ship of the group, and that's the P-72 Archimedes. The Archimedes isn't in the game yet, so it's hard to really know what the top speed of this ship is going to be, but it's the faster version of the P-52 Merlin. Now, in the Q&A about the ship, CIG stated that they expect it to perform somewhere between the Mustang Omega or Gamma and the M50, which is, for a ship that's only costing you $30 when it was initially released in concept, that's pretty good. And if the performance of the Merlin is really any indicator, I would expect it to be fairly nimble as well, especially knowing that it has better engines and sacrifices the primary nose gun for an intake to help with boost. The biggest drawback of this ship is that with it being a snub-nose ship, it's incapable of equipping a jump engine, meaning that you're unable to leave the system that you're in without the help of a Constellation or some other large ship capable of giving it a ride. If you're planning on just doing racing, it could be a nice option. Now, if we consider that death race scenario, it is nice because it's really small and it should be really agile, so it's going to be harder to hit. However, the Merlin doesn't really hold up well to fire, and with this being focused on speed, I wouldn't expect it to really live through much punishment. I like the idea of an Archimedes if you want a dedicated racer at a relatively low price, as long as you have a way to move it. But if you're talking about this being a ship that you need for other purposes, I would highly encourage you to look elsewhere. Now, before we get into flight-ready ships, let's go ahead and talk about one more that's currently in concept, and that's the Xperia Blade. The Blade is the latest concept ship from CIG, and it's a Vandal replica that boasts two TR2 engines on a ship that's currently lighter than an M50, meaning that it could technically end up as one of the fastest ships in the game. The problem is we just don't know. Now, there was a note in the Q&A regarding this ship stating that humans could take full advantage of the speed for racing. However, the Vandal have no interest in that activity. So we may end up seeing these engines tuned differently, so they may not end up performing as well as a dedicated racer. I think it's a safe bet that it'll perform really well because the ship's main focus is speed and maneuverability. The biggest problem with choosing the Blade is the price tag at $250, making it the most expensive option on this list, which is a lot to pay for a racer. Now, it does have value outside of racing though, so that helps some, but I think until we see it perform in-game, or unless you picked one up for some other purpose, I'd wait on it and look at the other options that are available. Now, getting into ships that we can fly now, we're going to start on the cheaper side of the scale and talk about the Mustang Gamma and Omega. And they're essentially the same ship, so we're going to lump them together. And the price tag is at $55 for the standalone ship. Now, the Gamma ends up being the slowest of the dedicated racers right now, but not by a ton. But one thing that I feel the Gamma has really going for it is the maneuverability. It doesn't boost as well as an M50 or change the direction as well, but I think it's probably one of the most controllable ships. The Mustang line just flies right in my mind, and it turns really tight. And in addition to having good controls, the cockpit visibility is one of my favorite of any ship in the game, giving you a ton of viewing angles, meaning that if you're trying to make tight turns or avoid obstacles, you've got a better chance of ensuring that you're going to see what's around you. Now, I think a good pilot can absolutely make good use of this and be competitive. However, with racing mechanics that we have in game now, speed is the real key, and there's a few other ships that just outshine the Mustang line. That being said, I think in a race that takes place in an asteroid field or something unconventional like that, you could probably end up making some of that difference up based on its attributes. But if you want a jump-capable ship that's on the cheaper end of the spectrum to race in, the Gamma is an outstanding option. The next ship we're going to talk about is the Xi'an Scout, which was just released for flight ready and is proving to be an incredibly fast ship, and it's going to be an outstandingly nimble ship as well. The Scout's been a ship that, in the lore, has won the Murray Cup, the famous racing match, so we know it should be a decent racer at the very minimum. There is one major problem with the ship though, at least in the current setup, and that's that the ring sizes on the racing map, it just doesn't fit through them. And based on the vertical flight position of the ship, it would need to see a pretty big increase in the ring size to be able to give you a little bit of wiggle room to make sure that you're not hitting the walls on those rings. I think we're going to see that increase there, so let's not really count it out because of that. Speaking of speed though, I think the Scout is going to be a really interesting option in races out in space because the cruise speed on this ship is incredibly fast. Now at $150, Scout is on the higher end of the price scale, but it does have versatility in other roles, meaning that you get a little bit more bang for the buck. I think it's worth keeping an eye on it, and as far as the racing role is concerned, but I would probably hold off in the time being if you're looking for just a dedicated racer until we see how the racing maps end up changing. The two current kings of racing are the ones you'd probably expect, and that's going to be the M50 and the 350R, both made by Origin. Ultimately, both are outstanding options, but I think there's something that you need to consider when you're trying to decide both of them. Do you want speed or do you want agility? Now, they're both fast and they're both relatively agile, but the 350R is the fastest ship in space, and if you're wanting just that blazing speed, nothing else competes. The 350R is significantly heavier than the M50 though, meaning that it does inherit more drift and inertia, meaning that it doesn't handle as well. Now you can learn to kind of anticipate how it flies, but if you have to make last minute adjustments, it's not going to handle as well or turn as well as the M50. Now the M50 isn't a lot slower, but the agility is off the charts. It's just super responsive. There isn't much that moves as well as the M50, and it really is a blast to fly. It's one of my favorite ships. If you're a player that's focused on racing and you're comfortable learning the course and you know when that you need to make those adjustments, then I think the 350R gives you the absolute best ability to win. But if you're looking to be able to adapt, or if you're unwilling to master the course, or you want to save a few dollars, the M50 does probably act a bit more forgivingly. Both ships are a great option for racing, but if only one gets my recommendation, it's got to be the 350R. Now, not only for the top speed, but also because it has better versatility and it carries a much better armament, meaning that if you want to use it as a scout or in like a death race, I think it holds up to fire better and it can dish out the pain better. Honestly though, both of them are phenomenal ships for racing, and I think the best action that you could possibly take is to test them both with Rec and see which one of those ends up fitting your needs better. So there you have it. I think those are going to be the best options for racing and Star Citizen. If you think there's others that I left off this list or some that you think shouldn't have been included, please feel free to chime in the comments. Also, for those of you who do spend a lot of time racing, please share your opinions as well. So if you have questions, let me know. Otherwise, stay tuned for a whole lot more content. There's going to be more videos to come soon. I'll catch you guys later. Take care.